It was enough in the 20th century to be an Armenian, a Jew, or a Tutsi. The year was 1915, and World War I raged furiously. While blood mixed with mud in the trenches of France, the first modern state-sponsored genocide was unfolding 1,000 miles to the east. As part of a nationalistic policy, Turkey would annihilate 2/3 of the Armenian people and nearly eradicate all traces of their 3,000-year history. The horrors perpetrated in the Armenian genocide were to be echoed in Europe a generation later, with the Nazi Holocaust of the European Jews. By the 1800s, the once powerful Ottoman Empire, which had stretched from the gates of Vienna to the Caucasus, to the Arabian Peninsula, to North Africa, was in rapid decline. Political and economic decay was so pronounced that Ottoman Turkey earned the moniker the sick man of Europe. As European influence grew, its liberal political philosophies challenged the Turkish Sultan Abdul Hamid II and found a home among Armenians and other minorities who longed for liberty, equality, and reform. But it wasn't just the Armenians who embraced Western ideology. An influential group of Turks, made up of bureaucrats, military officers, and politicians, also recognized the need for political modernization. Together they formed the Committee for Union and Progress. Known as the Young Turks, they overthrew the Sultan's rule in 1908. Promising a representative parliament, increased civil liberties, and a constitutional democracy, the Young Turk movement was welcomed by Armenians and other minorities. Hopes were quickly dashed, however, when in 1909 the Young Turk government stood by as those loyal to the Sultan rioted in Adana, massacring 30,000 Armenians. In 1913, the loss of the remaining Balkan territories set the stage for a second coup, in which the Turkish military and the ultra-nationalist wing of the Young Turk Party gained control of what remained of Turkey. Frustrated by territorial losses and internal decay, the Young Turks sought to revitalize the empire by emulating Germany's nationalistic and imperialist stances. Commanded by Minister of the Interior Talat, Minister of War Enver, and Minister of the Navy Jamal, the new Turkish leaders adopted a policy of intolerance toward the non-Muslim ethnic populations. A military pact in 1914 with Germany placed over 25,000 German officers and specialists on Turkish territory. German advisors had for decades suggested the removal of the Armenians from Anatolia to solve the Armenian question. As Turkey's largest non-Muslim population, Armenians were perceived as the leading obstacle to the goal of racial purity. The ruthless policies of ethnic cleansing that resulted were later to be refined and repeated all over the world. The inner circle of new rulers, including individuals like Baha'eddin Shakir and Nazim, managed the planning and implementation of the most sensitive initiatives. By the fall of 1914, a systematic campaign was put into operation to address the Armenian question. First, martial law was instituted and parliament suspended. Then, goods, materials, and money were confiscated from Armenians and Assyrians. Armenian government employees were dismissed, and the arrest and killing of prominent Armenians began. As Turkey officially entered World War I, its religious leadership proclaimed jihad against the Allies as well as internal Christian minorities. The first waves of massive anti-Armenian persecutions and mob attacks took place in the provinces of Diyarbakir, Sivas, Erzurum, Shabin Karahisar, Zeytun, and Van. Pressure was brought to bear on the Armenian population through a variety of tactics, including military conscription, forced labor on government construction projects, and the garrisoning of Turkish troops on Armenian communal property. Mass executions of Armenian soldiers and physicians in the Turkish army further emasculated the Armenian population. In January of 1915, the Turkish army suffered a massive defeat against the Russians in Sari Kamish. 70,000 of the 90,000 Turkish troops who fought there were killed. Enver, who was personally in command, blamed the Armenians for this disaster. April 24, 1915. Incarcerations began. Within 1 month, nearly the entire intellectual class of the Armenian people within the Ottoman Empire was arrested. Thousands of lay and religious leaders, politicians, industrialists, educators, physicians, and lawyers were executed. These atrocities did not escape world attention, despite the distraction provided by the Great War. The Allies issued a joint declaration holding Turkish leaders responsible for the extermination of the Armenians and Assyrians. On May 24, 1915, the Allied powers condemned these new crimes of Turkey against humanity and civilization. U.S. Ambassador Henry Morgenthau, outraged at the Turkish government's actions, filed a multitude of detailed reports gathered by U.S. consuls residing in Turkish provinces. Morgenthau's successor, Abraham Elkis, continued sending updated dispatches to Washington. The extermination of Assyrians, Yezdis, and Greeks continued at the hands of the Turkish military and the Tashkilat-i Masusa, or Special Organization, whose mission was to instigate large-scale Muslim insurrections in neighboring countries. The Special Organization also enlisted murderers and convicts to engage in mass killings. Women, children, and the elderly who were not killed outright were forced into the barren countryside in death marches, preyed upon by a Muslim population encouraged to plunder them freely. Further foreshadowing the Jewish Holocaust, the Young Turks used the pride of German technology, the Berlin-Baghdad Railroad, to herd people to their deaths. Not even the Armenian laborers who helped build the railroad were spared. By the fall of 1916, of the over 2 million Armenians and 300,000 Assyrians in Anatolia, fewer than 200,000 remained. The Mesopotamian deserts were strewn with dying women, children, and elderly. Hundreds of thousands of corpses painted the landscape. Some surviving orphans were saved by Christian missionaries, while others were collected by Turkish and Kurdish families and converted to Islam. The operation was expanded past Turkey's borders into Persia, and later into the Armenian provinces of Russia and Georgia. Over 100,000 were massacred in Kars, Gyumri, Akhal Kalak, and parts of Nagorno-Karabakh. In September of 1918, Azerbaijanis and Turks killed 30,000 Armenians in Baku. In a desperate move to survive, on May 28, 1918, the remaining Armenians declared an independent state in the area now known as the Republic of Armenia. Although nothing more than a country of starving orphans and refugees, they were all that remained of the Armenian people. On October 30, 1918, the Mudros Armistice Treaty was signed, ending hostilities between the Allies and Turkey. Immediately thereafter, the chief Turkish perpetrators of the genocide, including Talat, Enver, and Cemal, fled to Germany on German warships. Following World War I, the victorious Allied nations aligned themselves with the emerging Turkish nationalist forces, led by Mustafa Kemal. Crimes against the Armenians went unpunished. In 1922, France hastily abandoned its occupation of Cilicia, while Britain quietly evacuated areas it had controlled after the armistice. It was in these regions that the unthinkable took place. Almost 30,000 more Armenians, those who had survived the earlier slaughter, were exterminated by the Turkish army. Post-war nations, gun-shy after the war to end all wars, retreated into isolationism. Thus, it was no surprise that the terms of the 1920 Treaty of Sèvres, which mandated an Armenia within Anatolia, were not enforced. In 1923, the Treaty of Lausanne internationally validated the modern-day Republic of Turkey. In the end, Turks achieved their goal of ethnic cleansing. Virtually all Muslim, this unitary state gained international recognition, despite being built on the bones of millions of Armenians, Assyrians, and Greeks. To this day, Turkey and its supporters, including the United States and Britain, officially deny the genocide ever took place. A tragic result of the world's indifference toward the Armenian genocide is exemplified in this photo. Rudolf Höss, then a mere German sergeant serving in Turkey between 1915 and 1917, would later become the commandant at Auschwitz. On August 22, 1939, on the eve of the Nazi attack of Poland, Adolf Hitler gave a speech to his generals. Hitler encouraged his inner circle with the infamous line, "Who, after all, speaks today of the extermination of the Armenians?"